many seasons ago. 1. Indigenous population figures are highly contested, but there is agreement that the Pacific littoral was among the most densely populated regions of Aboriginal North America. See the Nevan 1992, Lightfoot and Paris 2009. In Graeber's magisterial handbook of the Indians of California, he at one point remarks that agriculture had only touched one periphery of the state, the Colorado River bottom, although the seed-using and fairly sedentary habits of virtually all the other tribes would have made possible the taking over the earth with relatively little change of mode of life. Evidently, planting is a more fundamental innovation to people used to depending on nature than it seems to those who have once acquired the practice, though elsewhere he duly acknowledges that a number of California peoples, the Yurok, Hupa, and probably Winton in Maidu, did in fact plant and grow tobacco. So planting could not have been such a conceptual innovation after all. As Bettinger noted more recently, that agriculture never managed to spread to California was not due to isolation. California was always in more or less direct communication with agriculturalists. More products occasionally turned up in archaeological sites. 2015 28. He argues that Californians simply develop a superior adaptation to the local environment, though this does not explain the systematic nature of rejection. Hayden, 1990. 4. We still see this mindset to this day. Of course, witness the endless fascination of journalists with the idea that somewhere on Earth there must be some group of humans that could be said to have lived in untouched isolation since the Stone Age. In fact, no such group exists. 5. This was admittedly not the only way to organize this place. Most U.S. museums before wars organized objects by types, bedrock, canoes, marks, etc. 6. Ethnology is today a minor sub-branch of anthropology, but in the early 20th century it was regarded as the highest form of synthetics, bringing together the findings of hundreds of micro-studies to compare and analyze the connections and differences among human societies. 7. This is sadly understandable. Exponents of scientific racism took theories like the Hamitic hypothesis to new extremes, notably followers of the Austrian German culture cycle school, Kulturkreislehre, but equally many contemporary writings by French, Russian, British, and American scholars. One particular interest of the culture cycle school of ethnology were the origins of monotheism, long considered a unique and seminal contribution of Jewish culture to Europe. The idea of studying an extraordinary variety of herding cultures, shepherds, and cattle keepers was at least partly to show that there was nothing special about the religious achievements of the ancient Israelites, and that monotheistic beliefs about high gods were quite likely to crop up in almost any tribal society that spent much of its time moving with animals to arid or steppe landscapes. Published debates on this matter in the mid-20th century could fill a small library, starting with Wilhelm Smith's 12-volume Der Ursprung der Gottesidee, The Origin of the Idea of God. Whistler, 1927, 885. Hans E. Vitello, the founder of British anthropology, wrote that though cat's cradle is now known over all Western Europe, I find no record of it at all ancient in our part of the world. It is known in Southeast Asia, and the most plausible explanation seems to be that it is its mixture of origin, whence it migrated westward into Europe and westward and southward to Polynesia and into Africa. I just chose to search for string figures in anthropology journals between 1880 and 1940 yields 212 results and 42 essays with string figures in the title, then collected in most 1968-9 and now also compiled and translated into English with commentary in historical context in Slanger 2006. Since the 1930s and 1940s, anthropologists turned first to structural functionalist paradigms, then later on others that focus more on cultural meanings, but in either case concluded that the historical origins of customs is not a particularly interesting question, since it tells you almost nothing about what the meaning of the custom is today. 12. Sidumon 1991, Sidumon 1992, 196. 13. This was in some ways closer to the kind of approach advocated in today's research on how culture spreads, although the ultimate causes now tend to be sought in universal factors of human cognition, e.g. Sperber 2005, Moss in Slanger 2006, 44, and see also pp. 69, 137. 15. For a general overview of and history of Northwest Coast peoples, ecology and material culture, see Ames and Masner 1999. For the equivalent in Aboriginals California, see Lightfoot and Paris 2009. E.G. Hayden 2014. Such broad-brush distinctions based on food preferences and resource availability were at the foundation of culture areas when these were first defined by Clark Whistler and others in the early 20th century. In the American Indian 1922, Whistler actually first defined food areas and then subdivided them into culture areas. For more recent and critical views of these broad ecological classifications, see Moss 1993, Greer 2017. It's worth noting that the presence or absence of slavery never factors into the culture areas described in Whistler's influential book, The American Indian. Admittedly, chattel slavery was an unusual institution among the indigenous societies of North America, but it did exist. 18. Actually, he was speaking of a cluster of related peoples, primarily the Yurok, Karok, and Hupa, who shared very similar cultural and social institutions, even though they spoke entirely unrelated languages. In the anthropological literature, the Yurok have often come to stand in for Californians in general, just as Guaycurt have come to stand in for Northwest Coast peoples, which is unfortunate since, as we'll see, they were in some ways quite consensual. 19. Goldsmith, 1951, 506, Egg. In fact, all this was unusual even for California. As we'll see, most Californian societies used shell money, but a man or woman's wealth was ritually destroyed at death. 20. Benedict 1934 156 95. The comparison between Northwest Coast societies and the noble households of medieval Europe was explored by Claude Lévi-Strauss in a piece which is not famous for its definition of house societies and is reprinted as part of his collected essays under the title Anthropology and Myth, Lévi-Strauss, 1987, 151, and see also Lévi-Strauss, 1982, 1976. Haida 2005 provides a fine-grained discussion of the different forms of slavery on the lower Columbia rivers, on the lower Columbia River and further north on the northwest coast, and how this developed in the early period of European contact, 1792, 1830. But she does not go into the wider contrast with indigenous societies south of Cape Mendocino, which rejected slavery altogether. 22. Sahlins 2004 69. 23. Goldsmith 1951 513. Drager 1951 131. Elias 1969. 26. Shibos and Hunt 1905. Codere 1940. Ethnographers in the early 20th century certainly regarded the occasional introduction of such practices into northern Californian societies as highly exotic and anomalous, as in Leslie Spears' 1930 discussion of the Klamath, who took up slaving in limited aspects of potluck after their adoption of the hoax. Powers 1877 408, Vida 1967, Goldsmith and Driver 1940. C. Especially Blackburn 1976 to 230 35. Casdon and Mann 1998 148 143 4. Napoleon Canyon 100 1970 17 18 went so far as to argue that it was functionally necessary for the Europe to decide the Natalia, i.e. money, but only if they were obtained from their neighbors. The social prestige involved in obtaining wealth in this fashion effected a more stable adaptation to the distribution of resources by allowing trade to be the alternative to rate in times of the local the, local insufficiency. C. Donald 1997, Ames 2008, C.F. Copeland, Stewart and Patton 2010. The case for some form of the case for some form of social stratification in this early period was convincingly laid out in numerous pioneering works by the archaeologist Kenneth Ames, e.g. Ames 2001. Arnold 1995, Ames 2008, Engelbeck and Greer 2012, Santos Granero 2009, Patterson 1982, and thus Goldman on Quadrille slaves, captive aliens. They had no kinship connections with their new homes and no genuine ties any longer with their original tribes and villages. As persons fairly torn loose from the roots, so slaves existed in the state equivalent to being dead. Being on the margins of death, they were by Quaker standards the proper sacrificial victims for cannibalistic feasts. 1975-54. Patterson 1982, Melasso 1996, Santos Granero 2009, 42-4. Seawolf 1982, 79, 82. According to Santos Granero, who has carefully compiled information about what raiders actually said they were doing. Fasto 1999. Santos Granero 2009, 156. This does not appear to be a mere analogy. Slaves in most Amazonian societies that kept them seem to have had the same formal status as pets. Pets in turn were, as we already observed, seen as the paradigm of poverty more generally in much of Amazonia. See also Costa 2017. For instance, despite the keen treatment a man or woman's dog, horses, parrots, and slaves were typically all ritually sacrificed on their dead. Santos Granero Obsit 192 4. So Graeber 2006. It is interesting in this connection that the Guaycuru, though they captured farmers and did not set those they took as slaves to work planting or tending crops, but integrated them into their own foraging lifestyle. 43. Powers 1877 69. 44. They'd been among the first on the Pacific littoral to succumb to diseases introduced by traders and settlers, combined with genocidal attacks. This caused the Chetco and neighbor groups to suffer almost total demographic collapse in the 19th century. As a result, there are no detailed accounts of these groups to compare with the two major cultural areas of California and the Northwest Coast, which lie to either side of the former territories. Indeed, this complex subsector of the coast between the Eel River and the mouth of Columbia River pose significant problems of classification for scholars seeking to delineate the boundaries of those cultural alter areas, and the issue of their affiliation remains contentious today. See cover 1939, Jorgensen 1980, Donald 2003. The historicity of First Nations oral narratives concerning ancient migrations and wars on the Northwest Coast has been the subject of an innovative study which combines archaeology with the statistical modeling of demographic shifts that can be scientifically dated back to periods well over a millennium into the past. Its authors conclude that the indigenous oral record has now been subjected to extremely rigorous testing. A result that in this case, Simpson oral record is correct, properly not disapproved. Disproved in its accounting of events for over 1,000 years ago is a major milestone in the evaluation of the validity of indigenous oral traditions. Edinburgh et al. 2017 12440. We cannot know how common such cautionary tales were because they are not the kind of stories early observers were likely to have recorded. This particular tale survived only because just believed the Wogis might have been shipwrecked Japanese. Sport and Kober 1942 1942 to 132. Intriguingly, in some parts of California, reliance on accounts as a dietary staple can be traced back some 4 millennia, long before the intensive exploitation of fish. See Tushingham and Bettinger 2013. On the northwest coast, bulk harvesting of salmon and other anadromous species extend back to 2000 BC and remained a cornerstone of Aboriginal economy until the recent times. See Ames and Messner, 1999. 50 settlers, 1968. 1968. Turner and Lowen, 1998. Take for example Joaquin. Take for example Joaquin Miller's 1873 373 for description in his life amongst the models here unwritten history. Here we pass groves of magnificent oak. Their trunks are 5 and 6 feet in diameter, and the walls were then covered with across and fairly matted with mistletoe. Coming down to the banks of the Pit River, We heard the songs and shouts of Indian girls gathering acorns. They were up in the oaks and half covered with mistletoe. We would beat off of the acorns with sticks or cut off the little branches with tomahawks, and the older squaws gathered them from the ground and threw them over the shoulders in baskets borne by a strap around the forehead. He then goes off on an excursus about how Indian girls are exceedingly small and attractive fit, despite not wearing tight European style clothes, thus exposing a popular delusion among overweening mothers in frontier communities of time. Feet could be free and still elegant. 53. As Bettinger puts it, their con is so very black-loaded that its capture as stars represents little self-time. Great correspondingly, there's potential for developing inequality. Likewise, by attacking raiders or developing organizational means to defend or retaliate. 2015 to 133. His argument basically seems to be that what the remote ancestors of the Maidu, Pomo, Miwok, Wintu, and other Californian groups sacrificed in short-term nutritional value they gain over the long term in food security. Much of what we've represented in the preceding paragraphs is based on a more detailed argument by Tussingham and Bettinger 2013, with the basis of the approach including the suggestion that present slavery is rooted in the seasonal exploitation of aquatic resources, can be found in publications going all the way to Herman Niebuhr's Slavery as an Industrial System, 1900. For a general contraction of traditional raiding practices on Northwest Coast, and further discussion, see Donald, 1997, Drucker, 1951 to 179, 57, Gola, 1987, 54, 94, 58, Compare Ames 2001, 2008, slaves could and often did attempt to escape as well, often successfully, especially when a number of slaves from the same community were held in the same place. See E.G. Waters, 1948, 80. This appears to have been something of a transitional zone on the lower reaches of the Columbia River, where chattel slavery blended into various forms of peonage, while beyond stretch a large slavery zone, Hajda 305, and four other limited exceptions, see Grabe 19, 1925, 2008, 20. Powers 1977, 1877 to 154, 75. Spear 1930. MacLeod 1928. Mitchell 1985. Donald 1997. Graeber 1925. 49. MacLeod 1929. 102 was unconvinced of this point, noting the existence of similar legal mechanisms among Tlingit and other Northwest Coast groups, which did not prevent the subjugation of foreign groups, tribute king, and enslavement of captives. Yet also concur that the only real slaves in the Northwest California were dead slaves, and that even these were few in number. Cf. Bettinger 2015, 171. If not Graeber's, then some other mechanism for suppression of chattel slavery must have been at work. Donald, 1997, 124, 6. Goldsmith, 1951, 514. Weisman, 1999. Was 1966, 172. C.F. Goldman, 1975, 102. 66. Khan, 2001. 67. Levi Strauss, 1982. Card, 1976, 338. Barclay 2002 107, 117. C.F. Graeber 1925 40 107. The Northwest is perhaps also the only part of California that knew slavery. This institution rested wholly upon an economic basis here. The Humas may have may have had slaves, but precise information is lacking. The Colorado River tribes kept Roman captives from motives of sentiment, but did not exploit their labor. Grabe 1925 834. Loeb 1926 195. Dubois 1935 66. Goldsmith 1951 340 41. Bettinger 2015 198. Bettinger notes that archaeology visible inequalities of wealth steadily declined after the introduction of dentalium in Central California, and argues that the overall effect of the introduction of money appears to have been the limit relations and thus reduce overall dependency of inequality. Peeling 1988, 1989, Leisure 1998. While captives taken in war were quickly redeemed, it seems that unlike in other parts of California, when tribal divisions assumed collective responsibility for doing so, here it was up to individual family. That peonage seems to have resulted from inability to pay. Bettinger 2015 171 suggests that this nexus of debt and welfare may partly explain the demographic fragmentation of Northwest Californian groups and breakup of collective groups to begin with, which were never very strong. Totemic clans, for instance, were absent, but did exist for the south. One early source, Waterman 1903 201, adds that killed are unable to pay compensation, but not forced, but, but not forced into peonage like a disgrace to their communities and retreated into isolation, often remaining there even after settling their debts. The overall situation did not come to look bit like a class system, as men of inherited wealth often initiated wars, directed the peace-making ceremonies that followed that that follow, and then managed the resulting debt arrangements, in the cost of which of one class of poorer household would fall into marginal status, its members scattering across the landscape and dissolving into patrilineal bands, while another concentrated as dependents around the victors. However, unlike the situation on the northwest coast, the degree to which Togandis could compel their slaves to work was decidedly limited. Spot and Cover 1942 149 53. As further acute in Wengrow and Grabe 2018, with subsequent more comments by regional experts in the archaeology and anthropology of West Coast foragers and their descendants, and others' response.